Awesome. Well, we are talking about flock cameras.
Right.
Ongoing debate about privacy concerns. There was obviously a big meeting on Monday. It lasted multiple hours. There were about 57 speakers talking about how they feel about it, invasion of privacy, if they actually feel like it's helping deter crime in the area. It was a very long meeting.
It was. Columbus Police spoke for about an hour. As part of that meeting. I think it went on for about 6 in total. But anyway, Columbus Police have really stood by it. The flock has helped them solve a number of crimes, about 60%.
That's a lot. That's a big percentage.
Of just their homicides.
Right.
So, and we've seen them obviously be used in the cases of Monique and Spencer Tepe. We've seen it be used in the Pammy May investigation. There's that side of it.
Right.
But then there's obviously the community concern about privacy.
That goes into, there was an audit, and basically it found that there were concerns that flock cameras were being used and the data that they were gathering were being used by ICE for immigration enforcement. After the audit was conducted, it found about 1% of that data was used for that. But again, that leads to this broader conversation of
how much is too
much? Much is too much? Who is having access to this information? Who's using the information?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, are people using it personally on company time or vice versa? So,
right, there's
it's
all
a
about
whole
these guardrails.
ethic thing.
Yeah, and it being a third-party system that's operated. Yeah, it's operated by a third party. We'll get into that in a moment, but we've also heard about it from state leaders as well. Attorney General Andy Wilson had some comments on the flock system.
Those flock cameras are absolutely invaluable when it comes to saving a kidnapped kid, finding a lot of times finding a lost adult or senior citizen, or catching murderers. And there's example after example after example of successful use of flock. And if you talk to law enforcement officers, detectives, they'll tell you again and again, this is the most effective tool for solving crime and actually a lot of times preventing harm or death that they've seen in their career. Is it subject to misuse? Yeah, just like the governor said, just like OLEG, leads, the law enforcement databases. The proper way to deal with this actually is to wrap a law around that punishes misuse of the flock cameras. That's what we need to do because again, everybody who's in law enforcement swears an oath to uphold the Constitution and protect the citizens that they serve. And when they misuse the tools that we give them to fight crime, that's an abuse of that power. That's abuse of that authority. They need to be held accountable for it. So I think this is the right answer for it.
And that's where that pushback is really at, is that abuse of power that he is Attorney General Andy Wilson mentioned, and that was really a focus point of the ACLU's conversation at the public hearing on Monday.
Yeah, 57 speakers spoke, and really just again, kind of the ethics behind it all, and the Big Brother feeling that I think a lot of people are experiencing right now, feeling like they're always on video. And yesterday, you sat down with Rochelle and Councilmember Emmanuel Remy. I was out doing breaking news in the studio, so I was not there for that conversation. But what did you guys get into with him about it all?
Really, you're gonna hear it here, but it was a lot about how is the city council going to balance what Columbus Police needs, but also these concerns of the community, some of which were raised right here by the ACLU.
I'll preface the rest of my testimony by saying, for the ACLU of Ohio, there is only one true solution to properly solving problems and addressing concerns. That is ending the use of and banning ALPRs by the City of Columbus. There is simply no amount of regulation or restrictions that will get us comfortable with their existence and use as a mass surveillance tool, whether in Columbus or anywhere else in Ohio. It is also important to note that this is not just a flock problem. Yes, there are entirely valid and necessary criticisms of flock, but there exists no benevolent, harmless corporation intent on selling to the rest of us the idea we must accept for our own safety, never-ending surveillance no matter where we go or gather. You can replace flock, but the problem is much larger than an individual corporation. On that note, Automatic license plate readers are finally and deservedly getting much attention from the public, news media, and government officials. But
So we get that side, and then there's the side that the public's upset about, that some members of the public have made like a flock camera database where you can see where all of these are. And, you know, he makes that point of you're always on camera all the time. So we took all of these concerns to Councilmember Emmanuel Remy just yesterday, and here's that conversation. Councilmember Remy, thanks so much for joining this conversation. This meeting Monday night lasted for several hours. A lot of different viewpoints presented there. Columbus Police talking for about an hour. We also heard from the ACLU and various different community members, all revolving around the very hot topic of flock cameras. So in the SparkNotes version, really, from City Council's purview of all of this, how are they trying to balance all of the concerns when it comes to these?
Well, I think anytime you have technology, there's, a lot of questions about whether it's used in ways that could, be in violation of people's personal civil liberties, or is it being used in a way to fight crime? And, and sometimes it's both. And so technology is ever evolving. It's increasingly moves at a faster pace. And so we, listened last night to both our division of police reporting out, one of the representatives from Flock, and then, of course, very passionate residents that had, particular viewpoints on what this technology means and what this is for our community. And so, we had to sit there and listen. And I'm trying to think of this in a much broader sense of, like, as we look at technology in general, because if it's not Flock today, it's Axon tomorrow, it's some other company. So we need to think about, like, overall, what are the overarching, policies that are in place? What are we going to do to make sure that every resident feels safe and protected, and not that their civil liberties will be violated using this technology? And that's not what we want. That's not the values we have on council. And so we'll work very hard to try to find that balance.
How do you navigate concerns, right? Obviously, there's concerns about flock cameras being potentially misused. We have seen instances where police officers have gotten in trouble, right? So how do you balance genuine concerns with potential hyperbole about the use of flock cameras?
Well, and what's happened historically, it may not be able to happen today because there's a lot of guardrails that have been put up. And so you think about, like, a lot of those transgressions that we saw, throughout the country, it's very hard to have happen today in Columbus, because of the guardrails that they put up. I'm not going to say it's like flock wide, but certainly what they've done to ensure that our people don't do that. Those are things that, we heard a lot from a particular subset of people last night that were very passionate, advocating against any type of technology for the most part.
Yeah.
I also know that there's a larger subset of people around this city that want to feel safe. They're glad they're there because their cars are still in their driveway, or if they do get stolen, they find them quickly. Missing children, there's certain aspects where this is incredible technology. It's been very helpful. So we have to just weigh that. I mean, everybody deserves a right to have their opinions. Everybody has the right to, express those opinions, but we also got to make sure that we're looking out for the overall good of the city. And, this is one component of it.
And when it comes to making sure those guardrails are followed, obviously there was that audit conducted on Columbus Police and their use of that. And let's take, for example, one of our neighboring agencies here, where 2 officers are no longer with the force because they were using it for really their own personal business. These guardrails may be in place, but how would City Council go about making sure that these guardrails are abided by?
Well, I think there's certain things we could do. Ask for regular audits, have them report back to council on a regular basis, whether that's monthly, quarterly, whatever the interval is. We can ask for them to be reported. Make sure that they're investigating every type of search that occurs. We can also limit who's able to make those searches. We could say, no longer can somebody on patrol make those searches, but now it has to be at this level and within this scope of, investigation. There are things along those lines that could help to protect, people using it nefariously or for something other than official police business. But then on the other side of it, we have to think about, what are the consequences? How far do we take this if somebody violates the policy? And, I take the LEADS system as an example, which is Ohio State Patrol system. It's a, government entity, but there are criminal, liabilities associated with it. So if you violate things, you're going to get charged. Is there an opportunity for us to do that? I don't know the answer to that right this moment, but it could be. And we just want to make sure that, it's all balanced. Like if somebody does violate these things, there are some significant consequences, including maybe leading up to termination.
I mean, 6 hours, sorry to cut you off, is a long time. A lot of feedback from a lot of different voices. What does the process look like now that you guys have taken it in, processed that information? What conversations are happening among City Council as far as what next steps look like for you all?
Well, I mean, of course, a couple of us talked a little bit after the meeting, but, I think that we've got to take it all in, kind of dissect and really, what did we hear last night? But then again, there was another part of the conversation that the community's having. There were a couple representatives. Dr. Londale Towns was down there speaking, broadly about Linden. I know that he's very entrenched in the Linden community. That's part of my district. I know that how people feel in that part of town. But we talked about, maybe we go back to our district and have meetings, with our residents to hear more broadly on what the feeling is associated with this. The question kind of becomes like, is Flock so damaged now because of all the things that have happened around the country that maybe they're not the vendor of choice anymore? And so contracts are kind of running out here. We might make a decision to move in a different direction. And then is this an important part, this type of technology in particular, is this an important part of the investigative process? And is it valuable for us as a community to make sure that we have it and be at the disposal and being used to help solve crime?
And we know that in previous cases, it has been a large help to the agency. For example, the murders of Monique and Spencer Tepe, it was used there, and also tracking down Pammy May in that case. But there have been concerns over the company sharing this data and information with outside agencies. So Flock being a third-party vendor, what kind of ability does the city of Columbus as a municipality have when it comes to limiting how much information is shared with other people that are not Columbus police?
So they've taken the step of going to one-to-one sharing. So that means that there has to be an agreement with the other agency whether or not that they'll share that information. So even Flock said last night that this is the Division of Police's information, the City of Columbus's information. It's not their information. They're providing the platform, and then we set the policy. So, weighing all that, I have to believe, based on those conversations, that information is ours, and it's not going to be utilized by Flock for any other reasons because it's not their information. Now, have we not had the policies in place, and has there been issues in the past? Yes, we know that, but we have to, as a legislator, I've got to decide whether or not did they make those changes? Did we make the appropriate changes? And are they enough, to justify keeping this type of technology? And is it enough that we feel that people's civil liberties are not being violated?
Part of the conversation we saw last night, though, is some folks saying it's not just Flock. They want to see kind of all surveillance scaled back. Where does the city of Columbus, fall into that conversation, right? You mentioned these cameras have helped solve crimes. They are integral to police work. Is there a world in which we have no surveillance? I'm guessing the answer is no, but where does the city stand in that part of the conversation?
I have to think that we all carry around cell phones that are mini computers. Computers are more powerful than some of the things that we have on our laptops, and they're all tracking us to some degree, right? And we don't know who's doing that, really. I'm not trying to justify it, but all I'm saying is that we live in a world now that is so much more technologically advanced that I'm not sure, if the greater good is served by a particular piece of technology, murders are down. I saw a judge, he came up to me and he said, I have to tell you on this Flock stuff, and he was a common pleas judge. He said, I can't think of a case recently that didn't have some element of flock as evidence, and that, you know, everything from domestic violence to, and the list goes on. So do we want to take that away from the judicial system that helps to prove one way or the other? You know, we added body cameras to police, and at the time, you know, they were against it, everybody was against it, but now it's given us eyes into the world of like what happens. It's not perfect, you know, it has this scope of view when we really want this scope of view, but you know, everybody else that's surrounding them, thankfully, you know, has the opportunity to take pictures as well. So again, what we hope the division will do, and we've asked them to do, and they are doing, is create an overall broad policy that, you know, again, sets guardrails for whatever technology it is, defines what the penalties are for misuse, and then we decide whether or not, you know, as we plug those different pieces in, contract by contract, whether or not they make sense for the city of Columbus.
And before we wrap this up, I just want to ask you, is there any other takeaways that you took out of that meeting Monday night?
I think, you know, everybody's just very passionate. And I think there's a lot that's happened on the national level to change like the mood of it. It does seem like government is really encroaching on our privacy and on our rights, especially people in Columbus, Ohio. And I'm very cognizant of that. I feel it too. I think that, you know, all of us that have families and you know, we want to make sure that we're protected. And all I can say about the city of Columbus is we have a conscientious council that's really thinking about, we want to make sure that everybody feels safe within our city, and we don't take that lightly. And so we're going to continue to evaluate, you know, and listen, I have a lot of respect for our chief. I think she's wonderful. I think that she has the best interests of the community in mind. And I want to, you know, lean on her, you know, to understand like what this really means, you know, outside of the noise. And then we've got to make decisions, you know, based on that. And it's not going to be easy, but, you know, we didn't sign up for easy. So we'll continue to take these challenges as they come.
All right, Councilmember Remy, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah.